Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I'm going to be joined by LinkedIn's rising star, Joe McIntyre, founder and principal over at 1248. And we're going to talk to him about his experience in the logistics fulfillment world and what he's doing with 1248 now. And also talk a little bit about brand, 3PL relationships, and also some great tips and insights that he's been providing over on LinkedIn and discuss those a little bit and really enjoy whenever I get a chance to talk to Joe. So happy to bring him on the podcast here today. So, Joe, welcome. How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, Kevin, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. I think I might need to change my title now, my headline on LinkedIn, Rising Star. Appreciate that. But yeah, I'm doing well. Excited to chat with you. Like you said, it's always been great when we talk, nerd out a little bit about logistics, talk about different things that are happening within the fulfillment space. So excited to get on video with you and talk through it a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely excited to make this happen and have this discussion. So I know you have a lengthy background in the logistics fulfillment world. So why don't you tell us kind of I guess a little bit about your background, some of the experiences you've had, and how it kind of led up to you starting this company, 1248.
Yeah, definitely. It's a bit of a winding path, all been within supply chain and logistics. Little stint in HR, but it still was operational. Um, I started out in large retail doing transportation systems reporting, but really started to cut my teeth there. And that's where I started to get this seed implanted into my thinking about the value of partnerships and relationships. I had a role very early on in my career doing carrier partnerships and performance. Um, and the freight market can be a wild place, right? The power swings between shippers and carriers, and you know, uh, navigating that was really important. At the time that I was there, a buzzword was being a shipper of choice, and that was something that we really focused on trying to do.
Mm.
And that meant not always winning and not always getting the lowest cost, but providing the most consistency. And that was something that really stuck with me. And so as I went through my career, I started thinking about what success would look like. And at that time, it was let's climb to the top of the ladder. Let's get a C in front of the title. And how do you do that? Well, I could be an expert in transportation, but if I want to go and see it all, well, transportation ties to fulfillment, ties to warehousing. So I got an opportunity to go and help a company launch here in the U.S. Um, there were some other perks to it. Got to live abroad for a little bit, but I was going to be able to work within
Nice.
operations and fulfillment. And I was like, I can do anything for a year, so let's go do it. We'll see what happens. We can pivot it to something else. Fell in love with warehousing and operations, and really understanding like the heartbeat that is behind the success of a brand or retailer, whatever that may be. And again, that was in traditional retail. So running multi-temp, multi-shift, $1 million square foot or million square foot warehouse, right? And really seeing what that looked like.
Mm.
Um, from there, some things going on in personal life, needed some different scheduling, things like that. Had an opportunity to move over to
Yeah.
HR, which was actually really pivotal for my operations career, in which I was able to say,
Mm.
okay, responsible for employee relations at stores and at the warehouse. What does that look like? That shifted into
Yeah.
an HR BP type role, in which I was doing full employee life cycle from talent acquisition through offboarding for both stores and warehouses, promotion cycles, everything like that. And so I started to see the people side of the operation through a different lens, which again, another one of those passing shifts in the night kind of pivotal moments where um, I realized I was really bad at it when I had my first managerial job when I was at the warehouse. And I had a lot of, oh, my life probably would have been easier had I known this now. And then,
Yeah.
I got through that, got the itch to go back to operations, got an opportunity to go to Amazon and lead a final mile
Mm.
fulfillment station there. And I got to put all that into practice. And I quickly realized that I understood the operations and that was helpful. But everything I had learned from the HR
Mm.
side of employee relations, retention, attrition, all of that, um, was becoming much more impactful when I became responsible for not just the productivity of an operation, but everything else,
Mm.
right? So the administrative function, the hiring function, the success of the full operation itself, the P&L responsibility, everything there. And then from there, I got an opportunity to move out of the warehouse and move into a more strategic thinking type role with Unibrand. So we
Okay.
were an Amazon aggregator, or well, at the time, that's what we called ourselves. I think everyone's trying to change the terminology a little bit, but essentially that's what we were. We were buying the Amazon
Mm.
businesses and looking to operate them. And I had the opportunity to build out the supply chain and operations team there very early on, and then had some other people join the team that were really, really smart in some different areas. But that gave me the flip side of the relationship. And instead of being within operations
Mm.
now, I was out searching for really great fulfillment partners, really good 3PL providers,
Mm.
and understanding, okay, we have these great brands that maybe made poor decisions with who they partnered with, or made a poor decision that they didn't partner with anyone yet. Or maybe
Yeah.
made a really good decision. We have a really good partner that we want to get more people into. How do we
Yeah.
navigate all that, right? And all of that through the lens of we need to reduce our operating costs, but at the same time, that's where it started to show to me, oh no, there's value in fulfillment. And if you shift from a
Mm.
transactional cost mindset to this partnership, it's a lever for growth mindset from a brand standpoint, you can unlock a lot of revenue, you can unlock a lot of growth, and you can take away a lot of your headache really quickly. It'll take some upfront investment. And as we went through all that, I started realizing, oh, there's an opportunity here to not match brands and 3PLs together,
Mm.
but get them ready to make good decisions on who they were going to match with, right? Um, and that's was
Interesting.
the
Yeah.
hypothesis of going out on my own to 1248. There's really, I came across all these really great brand owners that had phenomenal brand builders, phenomenal products, great marketers, um,
Mm.
but just didn't have experience and didn't know what they didn't know in operations, and therefore either made under optimized
Mm.
or just didn't had analysis paralysis and just didn't make a decision when it came to operations. And on the flip side, there was a
Yeah.
ton of phenomenal 3PLs out there that just weren't with the right customer, so they were getting bad reputation, right?
Mm.
And or they were also at a point in their business where they were trying to scale, and so how do they make sure they're taking on the right business to be successful, but also not turning down all business and therefore not being profitable? So
Yeah.
that was the brainchild for, hey, let's go out and see if we can maybe arrogantly go out and see if we think we can be the solution to this problem. And it's been fun to do for the past 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such an interesting insight and positioning within that world, because like you said, I mean there's several people out there and companies out there that are like you said, matchmakers, right, for the
Yeah.
brand and the 3PL. But it also takes time to be able to, like you said, set up your brand to be ready to get the most out of a 3PL in that sense, right? I mean, you come into a 3PL and your data is all over the place. Your SKUs like don't make any sense, and all these things. Like you're gonna see the 3PL is gonna be like, man, what's going on here, right? We're trying to figure this out, and then the brand is like, you can't figure this out. Like we've been doing this, ourselves for for this long time, right? But
Right.
it's different like when it's your own baby, right?
Right.
So I mean, it's great that you saw that positioning. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but I want to take like a step back in your career a little bit, because I want to
Yeah.
talk about this stint in HR. I think it's pretty interesting here. So I mean that transition like from the operation side to HR, and the employee kind of relations role. I mean, how does that how I mean you said that you missed operations when you were doing that, but I mean, how did that give you a bit of a different perspective on the supply chain and the operations overall by being in that type of role?
Yeah. It it was interesting, and part of it, I think a lot of it had to do with the company I was with at that time and where they
Mm.
were in their life cycle. Had I
Yeah.
been at a super established like retailer that had all the, I would never have been a fit for that role to begin with, right? But we had just
Mm.
come into the U.S. from Europe, where HR and employee
Okay.
relation, a much different environment, and so there was
Mm.
it was a bit of growth, right? Although it was a very large company, very well established, has been around for a very long time. Everything here in the US was new. And so how do you navigate that piece? And so, well, I say employee relations, and if there's someone from an HR background, right, like what I did may not be considered employee relations elsewhere, right? But it was a lot of
Yeah.
leadership development, is what a lot of it ended up being. We had a lot of really great store managers because we were a brick and mortar grocer, right? A lot of really great store managers. We had a lot of strong first level managers within the administrative and the supply chain functions, and then we had a lot of really high potential people within operations in the warehousing and distribution side of the business. But the common thread along most of them were they were in their first people managerial position, right? And so a lot of
Interesting.
them had the ability and the skill, but didn't necessarily have the experience. And so you started to see these
Right.
same missteps over and over and over, where, you know, it was a hard discount grocer. So being operationally efficient is super important. That's where the margin is. So
Yeah.
staffing effectively, being very efficient with what's going on, having certain levels. SOPs were great, but how were they applying them? And how were they doing that in a way in which the people on the teams, right? Your pickers, your packers, your cashiers, who for that business were also your stock people, also your unloaders, also your everything, right? How
Mhm.
how are you creating a good experience for them so that they can become as effective and efficient as possible while also maintaining a standard and having accountability? And that's something that when you have, regardless, right, a first time manager or first time manager of people in that type of role, um, you don't know what you don't know, and you don't have the experience to realize that, shouting may not be the most effective way to get something. Always going to
Yeah.
disciplinary action may not be the most effective way. You may actually be the problem for some of the things that are going on in your space, right? And so in HR, right, you can get this mixed perception of, you know, well, I'm an employee and therefore you're here to protect me. I'm like, yeah, I'm here to
Mm.
make sure that you're treated fairly, but I'm also here to make sure that the business is treated fairly and operating effectively, right? If
Right.
you are late and there are processes, you can call me and you can tell me, and that may look differently, whatever. But if you no call, no show,
Yeah.
right, that's a problem. Like, oh, I had all these challenges.
Right.
Okay, can we help you fix those? How can we, do you need
Mm.
to change your schedule? I can work with you on that, but I can't just every time you can't come in be okay with that, because we're scheduling, we're depending wherever, right?
Right.
Same thing, anyone that's listening that's in fulfillment will deal with, right? And for me, when I went to that role, I'm looking back, I'm like, oh, I was way too lenient because I felt that
Mm.
I couldn't be successful without the people here. And that's true. I could never have been successful without people. But I also carried a lot of
Right.
people that weren't actually helping me, right? Like on the roster is great. I have enough employees, but if
Yeah.
only 70% of them show up and I don't plan for that type of
Yeah.
attendance rate, well, that's a problem. And so I started seeing it through this different perspective, right? Which was very helpful. And then I shifted into this HRBP type role where I then started seeing like, oh, okay, what are the impacts of high attrition? What does it cost us just in time of people to do interviewing, right? If I
Mm.
need to continuously hire over and over and
Yeah.
over. And all these dominoes started to fall for me of, oh, well, if I create a good employee experience and I set good
Mm.
expectations and I keep the bar high for that and keep people accountable consistently, my high performing people don't feel like they're pulling dead weight. My low performing people understand why we're having difficult conversations. We're able to give them the attention and the training that they need. I am spending less time hiring. We're turning over the team less often. Therefore, they need less training and become more effective because we're not always in this constant state of people ramping up, right? And that's where, when I made the shift to
Yeah.
Amazon, the scope of my work was way different, right? When I went back into operations than it was when I had been doing the warehouse operations previously. But I was able to
Yeah.
have way better time because I understood now from that time in HR how that all operated, right? Hey, we're going to have
Mm.
some attrition. Let's plan for that. Hey, we're always going to have some attendance issues. Let's plan for that, right? Now we hire effectively to that piece. And now I'm not chasing that. And now we can focus on, okay, Now we need to do productivity. How is that working? Okay, is it an us problem? Is it an employee doesn't understand it problem? Is it the process is broken problem? Now we can focus on that piece, right? And then you start to get this flywheel is an overused term, but you start to get this flywheel of, okay, I'm not
Yeah.
focusing on all of this employee stuff because I actually have a good employee experience, because I am stern but fair, and I give people the ability to learn, train, improve, and I reward them for that, right? Had I never gone to HR, I never would have seen that. And I got lucky, right? I got to see it through other people messing it up, and therefore me having to come in and
Yeah.
help fix it. But in hindsight, I look back and it's like, that's good. And on the flip side too, not everyone mess it up. I also learned a lot of really great tips from a lot of those people, right? Like, oh, your store doesn't
Right.
have high
Yeah.
turnover. Oh, your warehouse has high turnover, but this team doesn't. What is this person doing really, really
Mm.
well? Right? Like, what's that shift leader doing
Differently.
really
Yeah.
well? What's this store manager doing really well? And then it starts to get into your mind because you're not in the stress of it of like, okay, now how do we take that and apply it? How do we now scale that? Right.
Mm.
And so you think about a 3PL that's got, I don't know, 2, 3 facilities. Things probably ran really smoothly with one. Now you have 2 or 3, you probably have some hiccups. How do you have 3 facilities
Yeah.
that's one 3PL, 3 facilities versus 3 3PLs with the same name, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's where I got a ton of value from that time in HR.
Yeah.
I'll shout it from the rooftops. Without going into HR, I would not have been as strong of an operator or understood or has been as empathetic or
Mm.
sympathetic to the challenges in operations. Right?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think that's such an interesting perspective and experience to be able to get, and it makes as much sense as like you're saying, and and I love the honesty around saying that you wouldn't have been as good as an operations manager if you didn't have that experience and understanding, because you do run into a lot of times the operations manager or warehouse supervisor that like you said, like doesn't have that empathy, right? Or doesn't have that thing. Like it's like the number is not the number. So that's it, right? So I mean, in that sense, I guess talk to us too a little bit about the understanding. You had a post on LinkedIn this morning, actually, as we are recording this, about hiring or promoting the top performer into like a leadership type position is not always the best decision. And I think, and I've seen that multiple times in my career. I mean, and I agree with you, but I'm curious your thoughts around this, and kind of why your thinking is that just because this person picks the most units an hour, they shouldn't necessarily be the leader of the picking team or something like that.
Yeah, it's it's a different skill set, and it's not to say that your fastest and your best picker
Mm.
can't move into leadership role. I've seen it
Yeah,
work, but I've also seen
yeah,
it fail far too
yeah,
often, right? Because it's all
right.
incentive, right? Like, what are you rewarding, right? If you want someone to lead a team, they need to be the one who is there to hold the standard, the accountability, keep people
Mm.
motivated, train and develop people. Someone on your team is struggling. How do you work with them to go forward, right? Like, if you think about
Mm.
sports, the best players rarely become the best coaches, right? Like, Mike Singletary was a
Yeah,
phenomenal football player and linebacker.
yeah.
Pretty universally seen to have been a complete failure as a coach, right? Like, Mike Singletary, if you're listening, I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I didn't play football, but it's there, right? On the
Yeah,
flip
yeah, but
side,
thanks
you
for
got
listening. Yeah.
right. Yeah, and thanks for listening. On the flip
Yeah.
side, you have someone like Andy Reid, who, yeah, he played football, but he was kind of a role player, got some time.
Mhm.
One of the better coaches of his generation and of his time, and has gotten a ton
Yeah.
of success, right? Well, you also hear interviews from players all the time that he's extremely relatable to them. He's gone across many different eras of football, of
Mm.
sports, of whatever, because he's understood the people side of it, and he's understood how to set a vision and then set people up for success to get there, right? Not that mindset of,
Mm.
well, I was great and this is what I did and this is the way to do it. It's, hey, this is what good looks like. This is how we think we get there. What do you need from me to help you do that? Okay, go execute. Okay, you executed and it didn't work.
Mm.
Why? Right? And that mindset is a big piece of it. And so when you think about, and this actually comes back to that HR piece. So, I mean, people may not believe that we didn't plan this, but like that was a great segue to keep weaving back through what we've been talking
Yeah.
about, which is like in the stores and in the warehouse, we were a growing company. So you had like fast movement growth at that time.
Mhm.
And we needed people to move into roles. And your default, if you are a first time manager or anything like that, is, oh, this person's my best person. I need to reward them so I don't lose them. I reward them
Mm.
by promoting them, right? Or that
Yeah.
person says, hey, I'm your most impactful person. I have your highest pick rates. I deserve raise more money, whatever. I'm out of here. What you want to reward
Yeah.
that? And the quick reward is, well, I get you a promotion, right?
Right.
But that's really setting someone up for failure because it's a different skill set, right? Just like Singletary and Reed, right? Like to play middle
Mm.
linebacker, you need to have a certain mentality and play with a certain type of aggression and understand a specific piece of the defense and your assignment and execute that flawlessly. But if you're a coach, you need to understand field position and maybe not being aggressive here is more rewarding there. And when do I call the timeout? And when do I make a personnel change? And when, like, there's a ton more to what's going on. And it just takes a different skill set, right? And the same thing goes in a warehouse. And so when you reward someone for picking fast, but they are not a good trainer, they are not good, they don't understand their SOPs, right?
Yeah.
They maybe struggle with safety, which is a huge piece. They,
It's a big deal. Yeah.
they're great when they're there, but they're not always there. So
Yeah.
now you are what you reward, right? Now the flip side of that, and someone commented later on in the day and made a comment, kind of a sports analogy almost, and I had talked about this. Um, that doesn't mean you can't reward your best pickers by saying, hey, you are very good at this.
Hmm.
Let's give you the tools to start to develop the things that are needed for you to take the next
Right.
step, right? Because uh, as harsh as this is going to sound, like the corporate ladder isn't straight, right? You don't go
Yeah.
hourly picker on the worst shift to the best shift hourly picker to the, like, sometimes there's, hey, you have maxed out on this skill set.
Right.
In the job description, they have very different things. And I would push this a lot too. Like, hey, you want to promote this person. Would you hire them if you had posted this role externally and they applied
Mm.
externally with their resume?
Yeah.
Right? Because that's the standard, right? And that's, I mean, you can say what you want about Amazon, but Amazon's really good at that. This person can be promoted or hired if you believe they are better than 50% of the people in that role right now, right? That's how
Yeah.
they keep the talent rising, right? So if you're just going to say, well, I want to reward this person for staying, but they're 25% below the worst person you could hire if you just went out and hired anyone
Mm.
off the street for that role, is that really a good hire? And have you set your operation up for success? Have you set that person up for success? Have you set the team that they're about to be responsible for up for success? No, you may have taken a short term, this person has stayed, and caused a whole lot of other problems in the ripple effect of what's going on. Right?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Very interesting point. And I mean, I think that that makes so much sense because it is oftentimes where, you get in that situation as a, whether it's supervisor, manager, and, the top picker is like, hey, I'm crushing everybody else. Like, I should get promoted. I should be the lead, or
Yep.
I'm the best. Like I should be doing this. Right. But and sometimes like, unfortunately the way sometimes some companies are structured, the only way to get them a raise is to, promote them to a lead or something like that. And then,
Yep.
a couple of months later, you're kind of like this wasn't the best thing, like, because they're one thing, you're potentially losing their output a little bit because they're more focused on leading, right, and doing other stuff. And then on the same end, like, they know how to make themselves the best, but it's hard for them to relate that and make other people the best as well. And have that understanding, and like you said earlier, the empathy to, those lower performers, like, why are they not able to do the same thing I'm able to do, right? And not be able to take the time to understand and coach in the right way. So
Right.
so definitely very interesting. And I think that, it's super important to focus on that. And it's really kind of cool, I think, how you got that experience to be able to apply that and put that into the operations mindset. So
Yeah.
very interesting on the employee relation side. But now I'm curious on the 3PL and or fulfillment provider and brand relationship side, right? That's whole different type of relationship there, but that's kind of what you're specializing a little bit on the 1248 side is being able to prepare and develop. And it's almost like you're getting ready to go out there and find your mate for life, right? and
Yep.
and so you go and you're like, oh, I'm gonna let me get a haircut, clean up my act a little bit, and all these things, right? So you're coming in and making these brands and fulfillment providers clean up their act a little bit. So tell us a little bit about some of like the big challenges that either from the brand side or the fulfillment provider side have when they're going to try and make up this pairing, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah. It varies based on the size, right? What are we talking? Are we talking about a 3PL that's super small or a brand that has just started
Hmm.
versus tier one legacy that's there, right? But the most important thing and the trip up that I see the most on both sides of the relationship is not fully knowing who they are and therefore knowing who
Mm.
they need, right?
Uh,
I came across and do still come across this concept, right? You talk to someone, it's like, oh, I just can't find a 3PL that's really good and can do what I need them to do. Okay,
mm,
who's your 3PL? 3PL XYZ. Like, okay, I know like 15 other
yeah,
people that are at 3PL XYZ. I also have used them when I was running brands before. Like, I've had a much different experience. Like,
yeah,
this seems weird. And then you start to dig in. It's like, well, we opportunity buy, so we bring in like 3 containers at a time, and then we do tons of kitting. It's like, yeah, okay, well, you were never a fit for them to begin
mm,
with. 3PL X, Y, and Z is all about like direct D2C, case in, units out, traditional D2C, whatever. Like you two aren't a fit,
mm,
right? It's like,
yeah,
or any variation of that, right? But it's hard when you don't know what you don't know. And I was talking with someone about this the other day, right? Like brands, by and large, and for the context of this conversation, I'm going to be talking about brands that are, your startup D2Cs that are in scaling and growth mode, right? They're doing like, I don't know, 5 million to 15 million in top line revenue. They're really going from like taking off to starting to stabilize to, okay, we need to start operating in a certain manner, right? Like not super scrappy small end, and we're not talking about like Harry's razors, right? Like on the super high end, I've
yeah,
been doing it forever. And by and large, the core founding team is still there, and therefore the mentality is still like it was in week 3 when every penny mattered. You
right,
had to be super scrappy with what you did. Every single person needed to be really in the weeds on every topic. And that's not bad. That's not a bad thing to have, right? And a bad mentality to have. But with that founding core team, by and large, probably is really good brand builders, really great marketers, really great product development, but maybe isn't super strong or maybe doesn't have any experience in supply chain and in operations. And
yeah,
they've been able to piecemeal their way there and get decisions and great, and it's been awesome. And I have a ton of respect for that because I didn't get in the arena and do that, right? But because of
yeah,
that, they don't necessarily, when it's time to take that next step, know what kinds of questions to ask to a 3PL. Understand that, yes, a forecast does matter because while you may have a 10% variation, you're not the only customer that's in that 3PL, right?
mm,
And if you don't communicate with them about when your sales are happening, you don't know. And they need to plan labor and they need to plan capacity and they need to plan everything that's going out, not just for you, but for the other 20, 25, however many other customers they have, right? And so
mm,
when you've either have a ton of experience on the operation side or the 3PL side, or you've just done it for a very long time, that starts to become second nature for you. Or if you've spent time on the
yeah,
receiving end of that, running a 3PL or running an operation, you understand that, and that's common knowledge for you. So how do you start to bridge that gap, right? And so it's not that a brand is a bad operator, right? Oh, they never give us forecasts;
yeah,
they're terrible. It's like, did you tell them that you need one, right? Like,
yeah,
what's your impact to it, right? Then on the
right,
3PL side, it's the same thing, right? Like if you are really good at kitting and you bring on a business that does full container in, full pallet out, and you don't have a ton of space to store it, like, okay, did you really set yourself up for them not to be mad at you? Did you really
Mm.
price yourself in a way that made sense for you to be profitable on this account? How do you start to understand that piece? You need to know that, hey, this brand is a fashion brand that's fast fashion. Like, their forecasts are probably going to change pretty quickly. You may have
Right.
SKUs that are coming in brand new tomorrow, right? Whatever the case may be. Doing the legwork up front to make sure that, hey, this is a match is important, right? Like,
Mm.
just like you said, if you're getting married and you're getting ready to go out there and you don't know
Yeah.
what values you care about, if you want kids or don't want kids, do you want to live in the city or not?
Yeah.
Do you want to own a home or do you want to rent forever? And then you go out there and you're like, oh, none of this matters to me. Oh yeah, but I can make this work. There's a lot of potential in this relationship.
Mm.
I'm just going to figure
Yeah.
it out. Well, that relationship probably doesn't end very well, right? Because if the other person
Yeah.
has really strong stances on it, it's just never going to be a fit. So doing that diligence up front of, who am I? What do I need to be successful? Can you provide that, either on the brand side or on the shipper or on the 3PL side? Super important. But that's where a lot of the work doesn't happen. And I can't blame anyone for that, right? Because
Yeah.
everyone's at different cycles of their business. Like, some people are in the money is money and we'll figure it out, and then we can start to niche
Hmm.
down, right? Or, I have bills to pay. I can't turn away business, right? Then it
Mm.
just comes down to your risk tolerance. Are you willing to take on something that looks profitable on paper with the little information you have, but may not be profitable and may be an absolute headache long term?
Mm.
Or, as a brand, are you willing to go to somebody who is really, really cheap, but may never pick the phone up and may take 7 weeks for you to inbound something and loses all your inventory and therefore you have to put out extra cash flow? Or are you willing to, spend a little bit of extra time and spend a little bit of extra money to get somebody who is going to be a partner with you to help you grow and evolve?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's such great analysis and insight there. I mean, around this, because it is such a thing to understand, like the full on capabilities from, like you said, not only from the brand or retailer looking at the 3PL, but the 3PL also from like the brand side too, like, and setting that expectation up front, and within the initial conversations, that like, hey, this is how we operate, this is what we expect. I mean, your sales there, like that you mentioned, like, are you having a sale, are you not having a sale, like what's going on? Like, I mean, I worked for a very large company before, and we utilized the 3PL, a very large 3PL, and the 3PL guys told me one time, they're like, oh, we know if you guys have a sale because we're signed up for the mailing list. So we see in the morning, like the sale comes out through the email list, and then
Yep.
we know we got to move more people to the e-commerce department. And
Yep.
I'm like, wait, what? Like, no, nobody's giving you a heads up from, like, the marketing planning side or anything like that. And we're like, nope, no, we signed up for the mailing list. We learned that early. So
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean,
So I mean, it's so important. Yeah.
yeah, it's wild how often you hear that, right? And if I'm jumping ahead, I apologize, but like,
Yeah.
that's something that I tell
Yeah.
people a ton, right? Like, if you're a brand and you're going into a 3PL relationship, you're not offloading your logistics and fulfillment to them, right? You're hiring a
Mm.
contractor to do something. You're hiring fractional employees to do something for you. So treat it the same
Yeah.
way as if you were hiring a fractional CFO, a fractional CMO, you were hiring a contractor to do something else, right? Like, you're vetting them hard. You're bringing them into your business. They're part of your important meetings. So the same thing needs to happen for a 3PL. Okay, maybe you don't want to have them sitting in a meeting, but that information needs to get to them. They need to be part of your
Mm.
S&OP process. They need to be part of your however you set up your sales calendar. They need to know what's happening there for them to be successful so that they can scale up and contract the way they need to. And when you're a good partner with that, well, now you start getting better rates, right? Because they aren't
Right.
pricing risk into it. They're not pricing uncertainty into it. You're able to
Mm.
say, with some level of no one's expecting 100% accurate forecast. That's ridiculous. It wouldn't be a forecast then. It would just be, this is what's
Yeah.
happening, right? Um,
Yeah.
but you need to be. It's a lot easier for a 3PL to go from 75% to 95% than it is to go from 0 to 100 on
Mm.
2 weeks notice, right? So, and then on the flip side of that, there's a lot of tools out there that I talk with 3PL, like, for a very low cost. Like, okay, if you don't have the infrastructure to really push your customers to give you that information and consistently be on the phone with them, and that's fine. But
Yeah.
then don't get upset when they don't give you that information. You can mitigate some of that by there's a ton of really great inventory planning software out there right now. Why can't the
Mm.
3PL use that? Right? The brand is, you're
Yeah.
already connecting to those brand stores for D2C orders, D2C. You know what their sales history is. So you can at the
Yeah.
very least give yourself a baseline of, okay, if everyone does the same things they did last year, here's what it's going to look like. Let's put a 15% buffer for growth, whatever the case may be, trend, whatever. You can do that. And you can start to do what the big players like Amazon and GXO and everybody else does from a 3PL or
Right.
from a fulfillment standpoint of, here's my 13-week S&OP plan. Here's my, 2 to 4 week scheduling plan. Here's my 2-day plan to make sure if I need to get VTO or VT out there. Here's my plan for
Mm.
tomorrow and how I'm fine
Yeah.
tuning it in, right? And you can do that for a fairly inexpensive and fairly low impact way. So if you're gonna if you have customers that aren't going to give you that information, you can buffer that for yourself to an extent,
Yeah.
or you can now bring more value to somebody else. You can say, hey, this is what I think your demand is going to look like in the next 13 weeks. Do you think that that's right? Do you have any other plans? And now you're being proactive, right? And now
Right.
you're driving that partnership mindset with the brand, and now you're becoming an educator with a brand that maybe is good but just doesn't have experience in the impacts on fulfillment. And all of a sudden you start to get some traction and business starts getting
Yeah.
better and they see their profitability going up and you guys are executing better, so now they're much happier. The conversations start to look different. It's all interconnected.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the point there about the 3PL themselves, like, or the fulfillment provider, being able to forecast and have some type of understanding of what's going to happen, I think is so true. I mean, you have, like you said, you have the data, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're shipping out the stuff, so you know how many packages, how many orders are going out for them, for that brand. And and we've done, I mean, we do something similar on our side too, on the fulfillment side. I mean, very very simple spreadsheet we just tracked over a little while, because for us, anything that comes in before 5 p.m. ships same day. And so we look in the morning, and we took, a couple weeks of data and understood that, okay, in the morning we started with this many orders, and by the end of the day we finished with this many. So we know we come in the morning, there's this many orders, add, 15% to it, and that's going to be how many orders we're going to maybe have today. So let's staff for that. So it's pretty simple to start to do things like that, and understand that. And like you said, when you start to do that and you're able to be flexible and manage that capacity, then like you are going to execute better, right? Instead of like saying like, oh, well, they're not telling me how much there's going to be, and now there's like a big drop at late in the day, and like, well, we're not going to make it, right? We're going
Yep.
to have to do
Oh.
it tomorrow, right? Like
Oh well.
that. Yeah, I mean, that's not the way. Like,
Right.
what you've done for the past couple weeks, months, maybe a year, if you've been with them that long. And you can start to predict and understand like how that business flows and how the orders come in, and all those different things. So
Yeah.
really, great point there. I mean, I think it's very important on both sides of the table to be able to foster and build that relationship, and not expect that the other party is always going to deliver the perfectly wrapped up package to you. And there may be some things you need to do, and to help them push along, but also in a partnership you're going to work together and figure that out, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about it. Every agreement, contract, rate sheet, whatever, is signed
Mm,
in the perfect condition, right?
yeah.
When's the last time your operation ran in the perfect condition, right? So how do you buffer yourself on either side of that equation
Mm,
against that, right? To make everybody more successful. Because at the end of the day, they're interdependent on each other. A fulfillment provider and a brand need each other, right? And the
mm,
success of one is inevitably going to be the success of the other, because when one side
yeah.
of it fails, both sides of it fail. Like it has to, they hold each other up, right? I
Right.
can't be a brand that is getting customer loyalty and all the free marketing and everything from being a really great brand to work with if I'm not delivering what the person expects, right? In D2C and
Mm,
e-commerce, the only physical touch between the checkout and a package receiving at the door is completely handled by your fulfillment partner. So if you're working with outsourced
mm,
or a 3PL, right? Like they are in total control of everything that happens from money leaving your customer's hand to them physically getting the good, right? So
mm.
why wouldn't you want to get that right?
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that's
Absolutely.
but it's one of those ones where, on a the traditional thought is it's transactional. On a spreadsheet, that's a cost that can be managed, right? It's
Yeah.
not seen as a investment on how we improve customer experience, how we grow our brand, how we
Mm.
find out our blind spots so we can plan inventory better, we can turn inventory better, we can improve our cash flow better. Your 3PL has all that information, right? Like they are a
Yeah.
they are a free consultant, a free resource, right? Like they have the ability
Hmm.
to work with you to help you get better, right? Well, I mean, we ran into
Yeah.
that. We couldn't figure out why it was taking so long or why our inventory was always wrong, and we finally picked up the phone and said, like, okay, we need to just this can't keep going. What's going on? And they're like,
Mm.
well, it's showing up mixed pallets. Like, no, it's not. This supplier is absolutely supposed to be sending single SKU pallets,
Yeah.
wrapped everything. Like, nope, showing up floor loaded, mixed containers. If it comes on pallets, they're
Yeah.
mixed pallets. It's like, oh, okay. We thought you
Yeah.
guys stunk at your job. Not the case. our shipping provider was doing something we didn't think so. They weren't labeling boxes right at the where, whatever the case may be, right? And you start to learn a whole lot more that way. But you got to pick up the phone or send the Slack message or get the cadence of just talking and it not
Yeah.
being you did something wrong, you did something wrong. It being how are things going, what can improve, what's going well, what changes are you seeing, right? Like, I mean, we changed packaging providers from feedback we got from a 3PL. We changed carriers with feedback we got from a 3PL because they were just always missing their appointments, right? Like
Yeah.
all kinds of stuff, and with very simple, no cost to us other than time working on a relationship with the 3PL partner.
Yeah.
We cut cost and we cut time out of our supply chain in other
Yeah.
areas,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I mean that's such a great insight there because I mean I've experienced the same thing, on the 3PL side, like being like, they're like, oh yeah, this brand, everything you're going to receive is going to come palletized, and it was the same thing. I'm like, no, it's not, and they're like, what do you mean, right? And then you send them pictures, and they're like, oh my god, like what's going on here, like this is not the way it's supposed to come, and
Yeah,
then you can make those changes and do those types of things, but you got to have that open dialogue, open line of communication to be able to make that happen. And the last person that touches that package is your 3PL, most likely, right? That you have some contact and control over. So ask them what's going on, right? We have stuff
yeah,
that's going out, and instead of trying to figure it out internally and scratching your head and making assumptions, like you said, and point the finger right away, like ask the questions like, hey, like is something going on, what's the problem, and then try to start to understand that so you can start to improve upon that. So very very interesting stuff with you here, Joe. I think that we could talk for another few hours probably about all this stuff, so maybe that will allude to a part two sometime in the near future as well.
maybe.
But I want to thank you so much for coming on and giving all these great insights into the fulfillment relationship overall world. You are the 3PL brand relationship counselor, I will say, for 1248. So really appreciate you coming on. And if people are interested in learning more about 1248 or connecting with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, to learn about 1248 and my background, my approach to all this, it's www.1248.co. So TWELVE 48.co. And then, like you said, I am super active on LinkedIn. And that you can find me at either just search 1248, search Joe McIntyre, or it's forward slash Joseph McIntyre 7. It's a lot of characters, but that will take you directly to me. Um, yeah, and maybe Kevin, we can drop a link in the description to
Yes.
help people out so they don't have to get carpal tunnel typing it out.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll definitely put all that information at thenewross.com as well as in the description of the video here too. So Joe, thank you once again for coming on. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you, buddy.
Yeah, Kevin, I appreciate you having me. We'll talk soon.